My mother-in-law looked me dead in the eye and said, "You were never really part of this family, Tess. You were just someone Nathan happened to marry." Nathan had been gone for 11 months when she said that. I didn't cry, I wanted to. I remember standing in her kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd made Nathan's birthday cake 4 years in a row, where I'd sat up past midnight with his dad the night Nathan's grandfather passed, and I just stared at the fruit bowl on the counter. There was one brown banana in it. I focused on that banana so I wouldn't say something I couldn't take back. I drove home, sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes, and then went inside to make dinner for my son. That was a Tuesday in October. By Thanksgiving, I would understand exactly how deep that sentence went. My husband Nathan died in February, pancreatic cancer, diagnosed in November, gone by February. We had 4 months between "we need to talk about what the doctor said" and me standing in a funeral home choosing between 2 caskets that cost more than my first car. He was 36. Our son, Cooper, had just turned 7. Nathan was a good man. I want you to know that before anything else. He worked in civil engineering, he coached Cooper's soccer team on Saturday mornings even when he was tired, and he had this habit of leaving little notes in random places, on the bathroom mirror, tucked into my coat pocket, in between the pages of whatever book I was reading. After he died, I kept finding them for months. The last one showed up in April, inside a cookbook on the bottom shelf. It just said, "Don't forget the oregano tea." I sat on the kitchen floor and laughed and cried at the same time. He was good, and he loved his family. That last part turned out to be complicated. Nathan's family, his parents, Victor and Lorraine, and his older brother, Colin, had always been a particular kind of warm to me. Polite. Present at events. The right number of hugs at the right moments. But there was always something underneath it. Some low-frequency hum I could never quite name. Like I was a guest in a home that looked like mine but wasn't. Nathan noticed it too. He'd say, "My dad just needs time with people. He takes a while." Or, "Colin's competitive, he doesn't mean anything by it." He spent a lot of energy translating his family to me, and I let him. Because it was easier than admitting I wasn't sure the translation was accurate. When Nathan got sick, something shifted. Victor and Lorraine started coming around more, which was good. They wanted to be close to their son. I understood that. I stepped back, made space, rearranged our routines around their visits. What I didn't notice, until much later, was that Colin was also suddenly very present. Not for Nathan exactly, but for conversations with Victor that happened in the den with the door closed. I didn't think about it much at the time. My husband was dying. I was working part-time as a hospital administrator, managing insurance calls, managing Cooper's school schedule, managing Nathan's medications and appointments, and the particular grief of watching someone you love disappear by inches. I didn't have bandwidth for closed-door conversations. Nathan passed on a Wednesday morning in February, just after 6 a.m. It was quiet. Cooper was still asleep. What came after was the part nobody warns you about. Not the funeral, but the weeks after the funeral, when the casserole stopped coming and everyone goes back to their lives and you are alone with a 7-year-old and a mortgage in a closet that still smells like your husband. Victor and Lorraine came by often in the beginning. I appreciated it. Then around month 3, something changed. Lorraine started making small comments. Nothing huge, nothing you could really confront. "Are you sure you want to go back to full-time work so soon? Cooper needs stability." And then Nathan always said this house was more his grandmother's taste than yours anyway, didn't he? I let it go. People say strange things around grief. I knew that. What I didn't know was that Nathan had changed his estate documents 14 months before he died, shortly after his diagnosis. He'd worked with an attorney to put our home and his life insurance proceeds into a living trust, structured so that the assets transferred directly to me and to a custodial account for Cooper, outside of probate, effective immediately upon his death. His parents weren't named. Colin wasn't named. I didn't know this because Nathan handled it quietly with his attorney, wanting to spare me the weight of those conversations while we were already drowning. He left a letter explaining everything, sealed in an envelope with my name on it, which his attorney held. I received it 3 weeks after Nathan died. I read it twice, cried for an hour, and then called the attorney to understand what it all meant. What it meant, practically, was that the house was mine. The trust was funded. Cooper's future was secured, modestly but meaningfully. What I didn't realize was that Victor had expected something different. I found out in September, 7 months after Nathan died, when Victor called me to ask about Nathan's intentions for the property. He was calm on the phone. Professional, almost. He said that he and Lorraine had assumed Nathan would want the house to eventually return to family. Meaning, I understood. Meaning his family. Meaning me and Cooper did not count. I told him Nathan had made his wishes clear and that I had documentation. There was a long silence. Then Victor said he'd like to discuss it further when we were all together. That together happened at Thanksgiving. Victor and Lorraine hosted every Thanksgiving. It was a non-negotiable thing in Nathan's family. You came, you brought a dish, you stayed through dessert. After Nathan died, I almost didn't go. But Cooper loved seeing his cousins, and I thought maybe it would be good for him, some continuity in a year that had been nothing but interruption. So I made my green bean casserole and I drove to their house with my son, and I told myself we were just having dinner. Colin and his wife Melissa were already there when we arrived. Melissa gave me one of those hugs where the person's arms barely touch you. Colin shook my hand. Victor was in the kitchen. Lorraine took my casserole dish and said, "Oh, we have plenty of food. He really didn't need to," and set it on the counter in a way that made clear it would not be making it to the table. We got through the meal. Cooper sat between his cousins and was happy, which was the only thing that mattered to me. I ate and answered questions and smiled and counted the minutes until a reasonable amount of time had passed and I could go home. After dinner, Victor asked me to come to the sitting room. Colin was already there. Lorraine stood in the doorway. Victor told me that he and Colin had spoken with an attorney, that there were grounds to contest the trust, that Nathan had not been of sound mind in his final months. I want to tell you that I felt something cold move through me when he said that, because Nathan was completely of sound mind. Nathan was sharp and present and himself until nearly the very end, and that a family understanding had always existed that the house would stay with the Whitmore name. I looked at Victor and I said, "Nathan made his wishes very clear." Colin said Nathan was sick and he was influenced. I said, "By whom?" He didn't answer that. Lorraine said from the doorway, "We just want what's fair, Tess. You have your salary, your job. You'll be fine. We're not trying to hurt you." I thought about my green bean casserole sitting on the counter. I thought about that brown banana in Lorraine's kitchen in October. I thought about Nathan's notes tucked into coat pockets and cookbooks. I thought about Cooper in the next room laughing with his cousins, not knowing any of this was happening. I said I have to get Cooper home, he has school tomorrow. I collected my sons, said my goodbyes, and drove home. I put Cooper to bed. I washed my face. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and called my attorney. His name was Mr. Patterson, and God bless him. He answered on the second ring, even though it was 9:30 on Thanksgiving night. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Tess, we have everything we need. Nathan documented this thoroughly. Let them file if they want to file. We'll be ready." I want to tell you that I felt brave after that call. I didn't. I felt exhausted and frightened and very, very alone. I went to bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about how Nathan would have handled this. Calmly, methodically, with that quiet certainty he carried. I tried to borrow some of his certainty. It helped, a little. What I did in the weeks that followed, I gathered everything. Every email, every voicemail, every text message from Victor and Colin and Lorraine since Nathan's death. I wrote down dates and what was said. My sister Pam, who lives 40 minutes away, came over one Saturday and helped me organize it all. She's an accountant, meticulous, and she sat at my dining room table with color-coded folders while Cooper watched cartoons, and she kept saying, "Oh, these people," in a tone that was almost funny. In December, Colin called me. He was friendly at first, asking about Cooper, asking about the holidays. Then he said he hoped I'd been thinking about what was reasonable, about what family means, about how these legal processes could get messy and expensive, and is that really what you want for Cooper? I had started recording calls after the Thanksgiving conversation. I didn't lead with that. I just said, Colin, I'm going to have my attorney reach out to yours. I think that's the best path forward. Another silence. Then, you're making this harder than it needs to be, Tess. I said, I hope you have a good evening, and ended the call. Then I sent the recording to Mr. Patterson. What happened next surprised me, not because it was dramatic, but because it was quiet. Colin and Victor had threatened to contest the trust. What they discovered, when their attorney reviewed Nathan's documents, was that Nathan had been extraordinarily careful. He'd had a capacity evaluation done. He'd had the documents witnessed and notarized. He'd anticipated at some level, and this broke my heart a little, knowing Nathan had sat with this, that his family might challenge things. He had closed every door. Their attorney, from what Mr. Patterson relayed, advised them against proceeding. I didn't find this out until Christmas Eve. Nathan's parents had a tradition. They hosted a small gathering on Christmas Eve. Just immediate family. I had been uncertain whether to go. Cooper asked, because he associated Christmas Eve with his grandparents' house, with specific ornaments and a specific tin of cookies that Lorraine made, and I said yes because I was not going to let the adult's ugly business take his grandmother's cookie tin away from him. I drove to their house. I brought Cooper. I brought a bottle of wine and a small poinsettia plant because that's what I always brought. Victor met us at the door. He looked older than I remembered from Thanksgiving, and I remember thinking, he's grieving too. Whatever he'd done, Nathan was his son. He stepped back and let us in. Lorraine was in the kitchen. She looked at me and then looked away. I set the poinsettia on the hall table and helped Cooper out of his coat and let him run toward the living room where he could hear his cousins already. We ate. We did the cookie tin, which Cooper took very seriously, selecting 3 with the focus of a surgeon. We did the ornaments on the tree. I sat in a chair by the fireplace and watched my son be a child, and for 45 minutes I didn't think about attorneys or recorded phone calls or living trusts. Then Victor sat down in the chair across from me. Everyone else was in the other room. He said, I owe you an apology. I looked at him. He said, we were wrong, what we did, the things we said to you, the things we implied about Nathan, it was wrong. I know that. I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure what the right thing to say was. He said, Colin pushed a lot of this. But I let him, and I shouldn't have. He paused. Nathan loved you. He was clear about that. He was clear about everything he did. He looked at his hands. We were scared, I think. We didn't know what losing him meant for us, and we took it out on the wrong person. I thought about what I wanted to say. I thought about the kitchen in October and the sitting room at Thanksgiving and Colin on the phone in December. I thought about Cooper in the next room. I said, I know you're grieving. I am too. But Victor, you told me Nathan wasn't of sound mind. You know that wasn't true. He nodded. I said, I need you to know that what you did hurt Cooper too. Not directly, not yet, but this is his family. And what you were trying to do would have taken security away from him, from Nathan's son. Victor pressed his mouth together. His eyes were wet. He said, You're right. We sat there for a moment in the quiet. I said, I'm not asking for anything except honesty. From here forward. He said, That's fair. I don't want to tell you it was all resolved in that moment, because it wasn't. Lorraine didn't say anything to me directly that night. Colin sent me a text in January that was 2 sentences long and said he was sorry and hoped we could move past it, which was short on specifics, but was something. The relationship with Nathan's family is still complicated. It may always be complicated, but something settled after Christmas Eve that hadn't been settled before. What changed practically? I stayed in the house. The trust funds Cooper's college and a portion of his future, just as Nathan intended. I went back to full-time work in the new year, managing a department I'd been up for before Nathan got sick, and the salary helped. What changed in ways I didn't expect? I learned that Nathan had known at some level that his family might not make this easy. He'd planned for it anyway. He'd protected me and Cooper with everything he could, quietly and carefully, because that was who he was. When I think about those last 14 months, the diagnosis, the treatments, the bad days, and the brief good ones, I know now that somewhere in all of that, he was also sitting with an attorney making sure we would be okay, making sure his son would be okay. That's the note tucked in the cookbook. That's what he was leaving behind. Cooper is 8 now. He's in 2nd grade. He still goes to his grandparents' house, still gets the cookie tin at Christmas, still has his cousins. He talks about his dad sometimes, mostly happy things. The soccer Saturdays, the voices Nathan did when reading bedtime stories. He knows his dad loved him. He has evidence of that in the way we live, in the stability Nathan built, in the house that is still standing around us. I still find myself turning to say something to Nathan sometimes, in the kitchen, in the car. A reflex that grief hasn't worn away yet, but here's the thing about losing someone who loved you well. They leave instructions, not always in words you notice right away. Sometimes it's in the careful documents they filed with their attorney. Sometimes it's in the way their child laughs, recognizably with their exact same timing. Sometimes it's a note about oregano in the back of a cookbook. I keep it on the windowsill above the kitchen sink now, held there by the corner of a small succulent pot. Every morning when I make coffee, I see it. Don't forget the oregano tea. I don't. I've thought a lot about what Victor said to me on Christmas Eve. Not the apology itself, though that mattered, but the reason he gave. We were scared. We didn't know what losing him meant for us. I've turned that over in my mind, probably 100 times since then, because I think it's one of the most honest things he ever said to me. Fear does that to people. It narrows them down to something smaller than who they actually are, and they reach for the nearest solid thing, even if that thing belongs to someone else. I'm not saying that excuses it. It doesn't. What they tried to do, the attorney, the challenge, Colin on the phone implying that I had somehow manipulated a dying man, that was a choice. Fear is the explanation, not the justification. I think it matters to know the difference, especially when you're the one who got hurt by it. What I keep coming back to is Nathan. Not what he left behind in terms of documents and trusts and carefully notarized signatures, but the fact that he thought it through it all. He was sick. He was managing his own fear, his own grief about what was coming, and somewhere in all of that he sat down with an attorney and said, I need to make sure they're okay after I'm gone. That's not paperwork. That's character. That's a man who spent the last months of his life thinking about someone other than himself, planning forward into a future he wouldn't be part of. I think about that when I'm having a hard day. Not as comfort exactly. More as a standard. He set the bar for what it looks like to act with integrity when everything is falling apart around you. He didn't cut corners, didn't assume it would work out, didn't leave it to chance. He did the quiet, unglamorous work of protecting the people he loved. Nobody saw it. Nobody gave him credit for it. He just did it. That's the part I want Cooper to understand someday. Not the drama of what his grandmother and uncle tried to do. Not the victory of the trust holding up. But the part where his father, sick and exhausted and running out of time, still showed up for us in the most practical way he knew how. That's what real strength looks like. Not loud, not performing. Just steady and deliberate and aimed at something beyond yourself. I also learned something about my own capacity that year that I didn't expect. When it was happening, the Thanksgiving conversation, Colin's phone call, the months of uncertainty, I felt fragile in a way I'd never felt before. But I didn't fall apart. I called my attorney. I organized my documents. I went to Christmas Eve dinner with a poinsettia and sat by the fireplace and watched my son pick cookies out of a tin. I kept going, not because I was fearless, but because Cooper was in the next room and the work of showing up for him was bigger than my own fear. That's the thing nobody tells you about hard seasons. You don't get through them by being strong. You get through them by being consistent. One phone call, one folder, one morning at a time. And then one day you look up and you're still standing, and the house is still there, and your kid is 8 years old and laughing with the exact same timing as his dad. Nathan knew I could do it. He left me the instructions. The rest was just showing up.